Hello. Today we're going to talk about Chapter 14 in the book Get Your Michigan Driver's License Back, which I wrote with Matthew Zick. Chapter 14 has to do with the elements of a good recovery. And this is important because you may or may not go to AA. And some people will tell you that you have to be in AA in order to get your driver's license back. But that isn't necessarily the case. It's a good thing, and it probably has helped more people than any other program out there. But what you really have to do is make the hearing officer believe that you have indeed turned a corner and that you're a more positive person now and you're engaged in positive activities. You've got a lifestyle change that shows that you wouldn't have the time or inclination to drink or use drugs, or that you wouldn't be doing the things that you're doing if you were still engaged in those activities. And if you can convince the hearing officer that you've made that lifestyle change with or without Alcoholics Anonymous or another 12-step group, then you have a very good chance of being successful at the hearing. The following traits are many of the traits that one sees in people that are successful in recovery. The first, of course, would be sobriety and abstinence from any substance. And while you may be taking a substance that is prescribed by a physician, sometimes the doctors can overprescribe certain medications such as benzodiazepines, such as Xanax or related drugs, or they may overprescribe opiates for anybody who has pain that they consider moderate to severe. In general, it's not a good idea for alcoholics or addicts to take an addictive substance if they don't have to. Obviously, nobody can make that decision but you and your attorney. However, hearing officers will look askance if you're taking other substances. And certainly if you think that you're managing your substance abuse. If you go in there and tell them, well, I've cut down my drinking or I've cut down my substance use, they will not accept that. The law says that you have to be sober and abstinent for at least a year before you're eligible. So even if they wanted to, they can't violate the law. They're there to uphold the law. So it's very important that you maintain abstinence, complete abstinence, and that you have so for at least a year. If you have 4, 5, or 10 years, that's even better. And the person who's making a good recovery is, generally speaking, not going to want to take anything he doesn't have to take. They also know that. I mean, that doesn't mean that there's never a situation where you would take a medication or a pain reliever for some condition. But in general, if you don't have to take it, it's a good idea to take as little of any substance as is absolutely necessary. Another thing that is going to be obvious is that you're going to have improved physical and mental health. If you're drinking or using drugs recreationally or addictively, you are not in the best possible physical and mental condition that you can be. And typically when people get sober, they start taking better care of themselves. They may quit smoking cigarettes, they may go to the gym, start working out, they may lose weight, pay more attention to their diet, eat a healthier diet, and just in general show themselves more self-respect and take better care of themselves. So those are indications that you're making a good recovery. Smoking in particular, if I see somebody as a client who has quit smoking cigarettes, I think that there's a pretty good bet that he's quit using everything else, because for a practicing alcoholic to be able to quit smoking is really unusual. most of the time the two tend to go hand in hand. If a person's drinking and they're a smoker, they're going to smoke. So that's a good indicator that you're taking better care of yourself. Now, there's a current fad for diagnosing anybody who has any kind of mood swings as bipolar disorder. Oftentimes, these are diagnoses that are given to people whose real problem is substance abuse. So you may have a coexisting diagnosis, but it may be that you were diagnosed with a condition that really was secondary to the addiction, and once you've quit using the addiction, these mental health issues tend to get a lot better, and maybe you no longer need to take an antidepressant, or you may reach the point where you no longer need to see a professional such as a psychiatrist or psychologist, but are able to work through issues more efficiently because you have a sober mind and possibly the benefits of the 12 steps and other support systems that you may be involved in, such as church or closer family ties. A substance-free environment is important to the hearing officers. They do not like to hear that you are living with somebody who is a regular drinker. So it's a good idea to keep alcohol out of your house. Is this a hard and fast rule? No. Will anybody at AA tell you that you can't be around anybody that drinks? No, they won't tell you that. But one client explained to me once that he would like to have enough time to regain his sanity, to get up, get his clothes on, get his keys, get in the car, and drive to the liquor store, and put his money down and order that bottle. He would like to have that much time to regain his sanity before he drinks. And that makes a lot of sense to me. In general, it's a good idea not to be around people who use substances. One aspect of AA is that it offers an alternative to the drinking environment where there are friends, there are people who are have your background, are going through what you're going through, and you have a network of people that are there for the same purpose. And that's one of the reasons why AA is effective. Besides having a program that works, it also has this network. And so it's not the only way, but it is important that you develop a network of sober people. They do not like to see you, hearing officers do not like to see you hang around with the drinking people, and particularly in the drinking environments. It doesn't usually work. Most people that do that relapse. So if you're not in AA, you need to develop a sober social environment. Now, some activities may be sober or they may be drinking activities depending on who you do them with. For example, you may go to dinner at a place that serves alcohol. Well, that's fine if you're with people who respect your decision not to drink. Maybe they're non-drinkers themselves, and they're not going to be tempting you to drink. Maybe you want to go to a concert. Maybe there's alcohol served at that concert. You want to go to a ball game, there's alcohol served at the ball game. It's pretty hard to avoid all situations where alcohol is served, but it's important that either you're going with sober people or you're going with people who respect your decision not to do alcohol or other substances. People who are making a good recovery generally have better relationships with the important people in their lives. Starting with family as a rule, they begin to repair those relationships with their wives, their children, their parents, their siblings, their family members, their immediate family members, and perhaps working out from there to cousins, uncles, aunts, and so forth. But one of the constants that I generally hear is that there are better relationships with one's family. And the exception to that rule may be if everybody in your family is a heavy substance abuser. In that case, you may need to distance yourself from those people. But in general, if your family are reasonable, sober people, you're going to have better relations with them if you're not drinking or doing drugs. Better job and school performance are also very common among people who are making a successful recovery. The typical person who is in recovery will get to work more often, do a better job when he's there. He's more likely to get promotions. He may go back to school, get some education that would allow him or her to get a promotion to a better job, or to leave the job that they're at and to find a job that is commensurate with their abilities. It's very frequent for substance abusers to be underemployed, and that has a way of correcting itself when they quit using substances. Recovered substance abusers generally reorder their priorities. People who are alcoholic or drug dependent are totally absorbed with themselves and their pleasure, and when they sober up, they tend to think more about others, and they tend to think more about achievement and making a contribution to their society, to their friends, to their family, and to their loved ones. And that's a good indication that a person is making a successful recovery. Recovering people generally are grateful people. They're grateful that they have not done serious damage to themselves or other people when they were drinking. If they were drinking and driving, if they've been arrested a couple of times, they were arrested because they were driving erratically and endangering themselves and other people. And it's important to take ownership of that and to be grateful for the fact that this behavior has changed and that you've been given another opportunity at life. Typically, gratitude is an attitude that I see with people that are making successful recovery. People who are recovering alcoholics or addicts have realistic goals. They may not have the pie in the sky dreams of being a rock star or being president of the United States, but they do set realistic goals, and they're more apt to achieve those goals of higher education, better job, better relationships, saving for retirement, all kinds of things that they wouldn't have considered that are part of normal life, but they wouldn't have considered them or put too much emphasis on them when they were using substances. I also find that recovered people are generally spiritual, and I define spirituality very broadly. It's a more optimistic and positive view of life. It's more having the attitude that if I do the things that I'm supposed to be doing, that life will have a way of working out. And as obvious as this may sound, a lot of alcoholics and addicts are pretty negative people who feel like it's no use to try because the world's a terrible place and I'm not going to get what I want anyway. So this kind of defeatist attitude is something that one frequently sees with practicing alcoholics. They tend to be much more optimistic and positive, and perhaps overtly spiritual in terms of having a higher power or even attending church or some type of spiritual group. Recovering people display clarity of thinking and purpose. They're no longer muddled, they no longer think in circles, they're not busy blaming other people for everything that's wrong. If they hit a bump in the road, they adjust and they move forward. They're not inclined to self-pity and resentment and anger and the blaming of other people that goes along with active addiction. So you see that. You see people taking responsibility for themselves when they are actively engaged in recovery. If someone is still blaming others for their difficulties, their focus is outside of themselves. They're really not focused on what they can do. And if you're not focused on what you can do, there's no possibility of moving forward. There's a serenity prayer that AA members like, which says, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And the real wisdom of that prayer is that it divides the world into things I can do something about and things I can't. So whether or not you believe in God, it's a good idea to divide every situation into something you can do something about and something you can't. And the things you can't do anything about, you have to just leave. You can't obsess about them. You must focus on the things that are within your power to control if you're going to have any success in life. My recovered clients do a better job of that than the people that are still using. It's impossible also to divorce self-esteem from behavior, there's a psychiatrist I like named Abraham Loeb who says every act of self-control gives us a measure of self-respect and self-esteem. And that is absolutely true. When people start to take control and responsibility for their lives, they immediately feel better about themselves. So that increased self-esteem, realistic self-esteem, is something that I see in clients that are being successful in recovery. Hearing officers are generally knowledgeable people regarding addiction recovery, and they expect to see tangible evidence of recovery. In the prognosis section of the evaluation. When I do my evals are 6 pages. They're not that 2 pages of hand scratch. So I spend a lot of time on talking about what you're doing right, so that the hearing officer can see in a tangible way that you've made successful recovery and are continuing to make that successful recovery. If you do your part at the hearing and make sure that you emphasize all of the things you're doing right, then you have a very good chance of getting your license back, usually with a breathalyzer for the first year. And then once you have driven successfully with a breathalyzer, they'll give you a full license, and provided you continue to live a positive and substance-free lifestyle, you should have no more problems with the law, and be free to live the kind of life that you want to, and be a completely fully trusted member and productive member of society. That's all we have for today. Thank you very much, and we'll talk to you next week.